This video will be about paraphrasing and rephrasing using SWAC. So SWAC stands for synonym, word class, active, passive, and cause and effect. So firstly, why do you use paraphrasing and when do you use paraphrasing? All right. As we've gone through in my essay structure, the first sentence will address the topic, and that's where you normally paraphrase the topic in the question. That is something that you will need to do. I mean, that's one way of starting your essay. That's a very common way and an acceptable way also, which is to paraphrase the topic part of the question, the T part of the question. Why do we do this? Firstly, it serves as an introduction to the essay. If you don't do that, if you copy words from the question itself, the examiner will basically take away the number of words you've used because you've pretty much just copied the question, and so they'll just take away the number of words from your word count. But more importantly, the examiner will not be impressed with you using the same words, in pretty much copying it from the question. All right. One aspect of one criteria of the writing task that you will be evaluated on is vocabulary, lexical resource, and it says, and for to get band 7, you would need to use a sufficient range, band 8 adequate range. Okay, I mean, whatever that means, that's up to the examiner to really interpret, and they would do that. But what you want to do is to be able to show the examiner that your range, the variety of words that you use, there is a range to the words that you use, and you do not use the same words always, and especially you do not copy the words from the question. Okay, so that is one area to use paraphrasing, but the other area is you may use you may write your main points throughout the essay. If you're using the GSM method, where you actually write your specific points in the introduction, in the part where you address the question, then if you want to write your specific points in the introduction, and of course you're going to mention the specific points again in the body paragraphs, and you may mention the specific points again if you want to in the conclusion, then you don't want to use the same words and the same phrases to mention those points again. All right. So this is another reason for you to paraphrase. You don't want to, especially many students may not write their specific points in the first paragraph, all right, but they may write it in the body paragraphs and in the conclusion. So it is imperative for you to paraphrase and to rephrase all your ideas and your main points, and not use the same words, because that will again not impress the examiner, right? So those are the two important places where you would need to paraphrase in the introduction, and perhaps if you mention your introduction, to paraphrase the topic part of the question. And for the if you're going to talk about your main points in introduction, the body paragraphs, and then the conclusion, then you will need to start paraphrasing. Okay, I don't recommend that you write your main points in all three places, because that will take a lot of paraphrasing, that will take a lot of rephrasing of your points, and it is not something that you want to do. Okay, because sometimes it will be a challenge for students to paraphrase and to rephrase their points, right? Now, one thing you need to note is that it's not necessary to paraphrase or rephrase every single word. Some words can be used as it is. Some words are just, you can't change it, and if you try to find a way to change it, it may just not be right. Okay, so don't think that it is necessary for every single word to change, right? Okay, so let's just go to the first way of paraphrasing or rephrasing, which is using synonyms. Okay, so synonyms are words with similar meanings, and that is probably the first thing that students think of when they want to, use different words. They just use, when they want to paraphrase, they just use words with similar meanings but different words, which means a word for word kind of exchange, okay, a replacement of one word with another word, okay, and that is fine, but that's not the best method, and but it is the beginning, okay. It's a good method to, it's a good thing to start with, right? So let's just have a look. This question says, some people say that mobile phones should be banned in public places such as libraries, shops, and public transport. So mobile phones, cell phones, okay, that's a mobile cell, okay. Some in various countries you also use handphones. Ban, prohibit, should, ought, or ought to, okay. So if you just use synonyms, this is the sentence that can result. There are those who would argue that cell phones ought to be prohibited in public places, okay, if you want to put such as blah blah blah, all right. You realize also that, besides these three words being used in replacement of these three, you also have other ways of structuring this. Rather than saying some people say, you can say there are those who would argue, okay. So of course there's more rephrasing going on than just these three words, right? But that is one way to paraphrase or rephrase, okay. So it's a word for word replacement. Now, one thing you have to take note of is that you can't always do that, a word for word, and especially students, what they like to do is they like to go to their dictionary, their thesaurus. Thesaurus is where you find synonyms, and maybe they use their own dictionary in their own native language, or even an English thesaurus, and they pick another word and they kind of like put it in for replacement, and they think, oh, okay, everything is fine. But just be careful, because a lot of times it's not going to fit, and that is the mistake that students make, right? You can't just anyhow take any word that a thesaurus says has similar meaning and just put it in and replace the word in question, right? Because it doesn't fit. The context is wrong, okay, it's different. You can't use that word in this particular context, and it will be very awkward. The examiner will definitely be able to, they will realize that you are just kind of like using a synonym and you don't understand how to use the synonym. You just put it in replacement for another word, okay. So that is the challenge here. This is the easiest way to paraphrase and rephrase, but it is also an easy way for you to make mistakes, right? Ensure that the synonym you use is the same word class. Word class meaning noun, verbs, adjective, adverbs, okay, etc., etc. So you would need to, if you say ban is a verb. If you are going to substitute one, just really replace this with this word, this one has to be a verb too. You can't use prohibition, okay. No, you can use prohibition if you change the sentence structure a bit, but here if you're just doing word for word, make sure the word class is the same, all right. And be careful when using the thesaurus. As I mentioned, as a word suggested may not fit in the original context. This is the most common mistake when using synonyms, right? Also, when using a synonym, to replace the original word, it may not be enough just to replace the original word with the new word. You may need to change the collocation or the word pattern. Let me just make this a bit bigger. Okay, so you may need to change the collocation or the word pattern. So you're going to learn about collocations and word patterns in writing class 2, and this is important. So let's just have a look at this. Okay, we should teach children to cooperate. Okay, so if that's the original sentence, you think you go to the dictionary, you find teach has nurture has a similar meaning to teach, and then you just substitute it. We should teach children to cooperate. And you put we should nurture children to cooperate. All right. Now this is wrong. Firstly, as you can teach someone to do something. This is a word pattern. Okay. You can teach someone to do something, but not nurture someone to do something. Okay, so you have to understand how you use the word may differ from the way you use the original word. Okay, so these are some, and collocations also. Okay, collocations, you just have to, collocations are words that go together naturally. So just take note of, go back to my writing class 2 where I discuss collocations, and you can't just substitute a word one for one, put a synonym into the original word, replace the original word with a synonym, and expect, and if you have, and expect everything to be perfect. Okay, that language is a bit more difficult than just doing this. So that is, you face a number of challenges when using synonyms. The context, understanding that the synonym may be used in a different way in terms of the word patterns and in terms of the collocations. Okay, okay, so that is for using synonyms, the S. Let's go to the next method of paraphrasing, which is using different word classes. All right, the 4 major word classes are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Of course, there are prepositions and conjunctions, but we're just going to focus on these 4, and these are the more important word classes. The point here is to note, firstly, you note the important keywords in the sentence and try to change the word class of 1 or 2 of them, and this would result in a complete rephrase of the sentence. Okay, this method, this W method, using the word classes, changing the word classes, is probably a better way to paraphrase and rephrase your sentence compared to, say, the first one, which is using synonyms. The reason I say it's better is that you are going to change the whole structure of a sentence more often than not, and it's better to do a complete change of it shows the examiner your ability in terms of your grammar and in terms of your vocabulary to really let them know that you have that control over your grammar and your vocabulary, and you can understand how to completely use a sentence with a different structure to express the same thing. Okay, so let's have a look at this. Nowadays, the amount of garbage we produce is increasing, and this is becoming a global problem. So you have a we produce here. This, by the way, should be a that we produce, but you don't have to write the that. It's a relative clause, okay, describing the garbage. So this is a verb, and this is another verb in the present continuous tense, right? So maybe you could change produce to produce as a verb, to production as a noun, is increasing as a verb, to increase as a noun. Okay, of course, increase is a verb, and also a noun. Okay, and increase, that's also a noun. So I'm pronouncing it differently because the noun version, the stress is in the first increase, in the first syllable, but the verb, normally the way you pronounce it, to increase, is in the second syllable. Okay, so but of course, if you're writing, you wouldn't know all this, but just to let you know, this word increase can be used as a noun and a verb, right? So we've changed these are important words, okay, and we've changed the word class, and here it becomes, these days there is an increase in production of rubbish throughout the world. Okay, so you see that this sentence and this sentence is totally different. The structure is totally different. You don't start with, the subject is no longer the amount of garbage we produce. The subject is, in the first sentence, is this, but here you use a there as a subject. Okay, this special structure there is, okay, there plus be. So this is a bigger change, right? And as I mentioned, this is probably a better way to paraphrase and rephrase your sentences, right? When changing word classes, it is also important to take note of collocations and word patterns. Again, the same thing, okay, as before. If you're going to use a noun, then you'll most likely need to think of a verb that collocates, that combines well with the noun. You will also need to consider the word patterns. For example, when you change prefer to preference, you need to use the correct verb have, and also use for after preference. Okay, so if you say many people prefer to study abroad, If you're going to change this, rather than using prefer as a verb, you're going to use preference as a noun. Then it will be many people have a preference for studying. So firstly, you are using as a noun. You have to know, you have to find the correct verb. Okay, I'm not going to explain to you what collocations are, because I go through that pretty much in depth in writing class 2. So just take note here that you will need, sometimes when you have a noun, you may need a verb, and the verb has to be what you call a collocation. And by the way, collocations are, you see that? That's what examiners look out for also. So this technical term is actually important in terms of your IELTS, because it's one thing that examiners look out for. Okay, so a collocation is just a word that goes together with another word. Here you need a verb, correct verb. So you have to think, if you change it to a noun, you have to think of what verb should I use. You can't say, for example, many people make a preference for studying abroad. Okay, students may say this. This is not the right collocation. You don't make a preference, you have a preference. Okay, and again, you also have to use for, because that's the way you use you just have to use this preposition for. All right, not preference of, not preference to, but preference for. Okay, these are collocations also. So this is a verb collocation, this is a preposition collocation. You have to get it right. So just by using a word class, you have to think about a lot of other things. Okay, the word patterns, the collocations, etc. Okay, that's the reason why I do talk about word patterns and collocations in my writing class 2, where I mention it in the top 12 grammar and vocabulary mistakes that students make. All right. Okay, so this is using different word classes. This is a better way to paraphrase than just using synonyms alone. All right. Thirdly, you can use active, changing active to passive or passive to active, whatever it may be. Active and passive, again, these are grammar points that I touch on in my writing class 2, in the top 12 mistakes. So I'm not going to touch on it here, but you guys should know what active and passive is, and what this method of paraphrasing and rephrasing is that if the sentence is in active voice, you change it to passive, or if it's in passive, you change it to active. Okay, so a sentence is in the active voice when the subject is in the sentence is the doer of the action, while a sentence in the passive is when the subject is the receiver of an action. For example, John hit Jack. That's John is the doer of the action. So this is an active. That's active voice, and this is the way that most people speak. All right. But if you want to, you want to focus on the receiver of the action, or the action itself, you put the receiver of the action in front. Jack was hit. This is passive. Okay, you guys probably know how to change John hit Jack to Jack was hit by John, but you don't know, you may not know, or you may not remember that this is the difference between the active and passive voice. Okay, so now what this method involves is changing just basically changing around active to passive or passive to active voice. And this is a method just like the one before. As I mentioned, one of the advantages of using this method is that the sentence structure actually changes a lot from this sentence to this sentence, whereas when you use synonyms, it doesn't really change a lot. So for this method, changing active voice to passive voice or vice versa, the structure will definitely change a lot. Okay, the structure of the sentence will change a lot. So for example, the government should fund children's art courses, right? And when it goes to passive, children's art courses should be funded by the government. Okay, so that is the way you really this is one way of paraphrasing. Okay, or if you come across this, children's art courses should be funded by the government, you can change it to active. Okay, it changes the whole structure around. All right. So anyway, changing a sentence from active voice to passive voice can only occur if your original sentence has a transitive verb and thus an object. Okay, so you can't just go from active to passive for every sentence, because firstly, you need an object. or the receiver, someone or something that receives the action. And not every verb requires an object. For example, if you said John slept, full stop. Sleep here is not, it doesn't require an object. Okay, so you can't put it in passive form, in the passive voice, right? So it requires an object. You got to use a verb which is what you call transitive. Again, this is something that I will touch on a bit in the writing class 2, where I talk about the top 12 mistakes. And a transitive verb is a verb that requires an object. Okay, so you have to use a transitive verb, then you have an object, then you put object to the front, the subject position, and the receiver action to the subject position in the front, and then you have the passive. So without using a transitive verb, if you don't use a transitive verb, you don't have an object, you can't change it around. Okay, so it's not something that you can do always. But of course, if you already have, the question already has a passive voice, is in passive voice, then you should be able to change it to active voice most of the time. Okay. Okay, lastly, you have the C, which is cause effect to effect cause. So this again involves a structural change in terms of your sentence. This method involves changing the positions of the cause and effect in the sentence. In the sentence below, the effect is placed at the beginning of the sentence and the cause is at the end. So global warming is the result of the increase in carbon dioxide emissions, or is due to, or is because of. So here is the effect. This is basically the cause. Now, if you come across this sentence, you can always paraphrase it. We could change this and state the cause at the beginning and the effect at the end. So the increase in carbon dioxide emissions results in, leads to global warming. Okay? So, and vice versa, if you have this, the cause and then the effect, you can change it the other way around. Okay? So these are the 4 methods, the main methods of paraphrasing and rephrasing your sentences. Again, they are used in your introduction. You can to paraphrase the topic part of the question, and it can also be used in the when you want to paraphrase the main points. If you're going to mention your main points throughout your essay, maybe in your introduction, your body, and your conclusion. But especially because for most students, they're going to mention their main points in the body, and then they want to summarize it in the conclusion. You would this is a good way to paraphrase and rephrase your sentences. Okay, these are not the only ways, but these are just some ways that you should consider. These are the most basic and common ways, right?